I'm hungry.
You're always hungry.
Welcome to episode number 33.
Welcome to Seeking Focus, a podcast that provides photographers and videographers with a place to critically compare technology, share ideas, and enhance their skills.
Hey, Muddy. How are ya?
Mate, you know what? I've had a really crappy week.
Join the club.
Oh, mate.
Let's compare notes.
Did I tell you I've actually done my back? I went to the doctor and then I've done my L5 disc. I've got a bulging disc.
Really?
Far out, man. It is the worst freaking pain. I can't move as well.
I actually have a number of friends who've had the same thing happen to them. It's actually seems to be really common at the moment, which is really bizarre because it's not something that you would ever have heard of in past. But I know of 3 people who've got the same problem.
It's just I work too hard, man. That's where it is.
It is. Now, look, if you want to hand over your, I was going to say your cameras, but they're all Sony, so don't worry about that. If you want to hand over your drones, I'm happy to carry them for you and keep them and store them and use them. I mean,
the wheelie cases, man, sucking wheeling behind me. But yeah, look, it you know what though? It's a must say. Anything with health, and that's what I'm saying. Like, take care of yourself, because anything with health, it's so depressing, man. Like, I did this disc, right? And to be honest with you, I'm still feeling it. I'm probably about 80% there at the moment. But I felt so depressed, man. Like, you kind of go, you feel like there's no point anymore. Do you know what I mean? It's really hard to sort of justify, like, I'm doing, a few things in the house and like renovation, decking and whatever else in the backyard. And really, like, last probably a week, I've just been feeling really bad. Like, you feel depressed, man. Like, you think to yourself, what's the point of, what's the point of doing anything if you can't do anything with it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, but, just my crappy week, that's all. But look, a lot of work still coming in, which is a good thing, but it's just still kind of frustrating and, whatever else. So anyway, I just thought I'll add that in.
The pain and misery. Well, I've got a medical issue too.
Oh, yeah.
So I, for a very long time, kept bragging about how great my teeth were. But I'm quite long in the tooth, as they say.
Right.
And basically, I've only had like 3 or 4 fillings in my entire life.
That's good.
Yeah, so that's remarkable. But one of those fillings was playing up, and I went and saw the doctor. I said, my tooth's hurting, every time I breathe, because I'm a mouth breather. Especially when I'm cycling or doing exercise.
Yeah.
And so I went to the doctor and he goes, he goes, the filling we've done has basically, there's some erosion around it, so we have to redo it. And we have to get really close to the nerve, and that's what's actually causing you the pain. And of course, I went into overdrive, thinking I was going to die or something. So I don't know how to deal with it because I don't really go to the dentist very often. And he did the work, but the problem is, it was actually quite deep. So I've been getting these earaches that have, because of the work, I keep getting these earaches and these headaches. And he did warn me that I was going to feel like crap afterwards because it was quite extensive. But so I might try and keep a little bit quiet.
You've got to take care of yourself, man. You've got to take care of yourself. But people take care of yourself because you can't take photos, you can't take video, and you can't fly definitely drones, mate, if you're in pain.
Yeah, and there's no health insurance. Which is one of the sad truths about this industry.
Well, actually, I went to do MRI on my back, and it's not covered under Medicare, so Australian, obviously, health system. It's not covered under private healthcare because I've got full private healthcare. So out of pocket, over $300.
That's cheap.
Is it? I don't know.
300 is cheap for anything like that. Trust me on that one.
Anyway,
so you're very fortunate. But anyway, let's move along. And thank you very much for the. Just a heads up to everyone. We're in Marty's studio today, and he's prepared this tea for me.
It's a bucket.
This is not a cup. This is literally I could dunk my head in. It's so big. I expect to see fish. I expect to see fish floating around. But thanks for that, Marty. It's great. All right, so today's episode very different to. And the lights keep changing in this room. So
I'm playing with it.
If you notice that I start, going quiet or stop talking for a few seconds, it's because the lights keep changing. It's like a nightclub in here.
Blue color. It's a blue theme.
Isn't blue light meant to be bad for you?
Is it? I don't know.
It's going to keep me awake all night.
Well, it's a theme of seeking focus.
Oh, we do use a lot of blue, don't we?
Yeah.
Never really thought of that before. Anyway, back to the episode.
Yes.
All right, so today we're looking at filters. Now, I know it's your favourite subject.
Oh, my favourite filter, especially UV.
UV, yeah. But there is a variety of filters out there, and we're going to basically have a quick rundown of different types of filters, different sizes, different purposes. And after all that, we're going to have a quick look at the new NISI. It's called True Color Variable ND filter. I think it's a Nano series, which they've sent to us courtesy of NISI. And also thank you very much to Video Guys for organising it, because we don't have contacts at NISI. They organise it for us. So thanks to...
Video Guys are the best. Check out the rest. All right, come on.
I'm sorry.
They've been good. They've been, supplying us with a lot of stuff. So, you got to give them a shout out.
That's true. They have been supplying us with a lot of stuff. But yeah, so I wasn't expecting you to do that.
There you go. There you go.
So you caught me off guard. All right. So what are filters? What do they do? Come on, Marty. Break it down for us.
So we've got, you mean like you want to list out what they are?
What's the purpose of a filter?
Well, to cut down the light, right?
Okay.
And to protect the lens, so they say.
Okay. So they vary the level and type of light being absorbed by your camera's sensor. They can be used to protect your lenses, which is a big thing for me.
It's a big thing for me as well, man. But the only thing is, if I know that the lens is not going to get, throwing rocks at it and everything else, I don't believe using it. That's all.
Yeah, look, that's fair enough. I mean, but what I do is I go out there and I'm walking around, I hit my camera around, so it's a safety factor for me. But it also can minimize glare. It can, stop reflections, enhance colors, so on and so on. Yeah. Right, so they change the way your camera sees light, and it also protects your camera. So that's basically what the filters do. Yeah. Love them or hate them, that's what they do. All right, so a couple of different filters that you can get for your camera. The one that I predominantly have in all my lenses is a UV filter, which basically is meant to cut down the UV light, which means absolutely nothing other than the fact that there's a piece of glass there to protect your lens from being hit. I've had a couple of my lenses saved by using UV filters, so I'm a big supporter of UV filters. What else have we got? What type of other filters do we have?
Well, I haven't done a lot of notes for this, so I'm going to just have a quick look at that.
Yes, do my notes. Come on, what filters have you used?
Color filters?
Or color filters. So basically filters that, can change the color. So you can have like a yellow filter, orange filter. You can create that sunset orange feel by putting an orange filter on the front. I'm not a huge fan of them. I don't use them too often. I've got a couple of sepia ones. I believe I've got a tobacco one somewhere at home. And a couple of others.
I think I've used the tobacco one, your tobacco one. Actually, I didn't mind it.
Yeah, look,
it's good for sort of being a little bit more creative and whatever else. But you probably wouldn't use it for like a studio shoot. Or whatever else,
it's more outdoorsy. I use it for outdoor landscapes and stuff like that. That's the type of thing I do. The solar filters, infrared filters. Currently, some of my favorites are the Pro Mists and the Black Mists.
I never used one, so it'll be interesting to sort of,
play around with them. What they do is they basically enhance light. So basically, if you're shooting in the middle of the day or during the night, if there's a bright light source, what it does is it creates a bit of a mist around it. So it gives it a soft feeling. It's almost like the old days when you used to use your SLR cameras, which is prior to DSLRs, for those people who don't know. Because people are like, where did the D go? And people used to run like silk stockings over the front of the lens to give it that bit of that smooth, intimate sort of feeling, and that would be modelling shots.
Long time ago.
Yeah, so basically you can use it for that. I did recently a recording in a street scene where a car's coming down the actual road, and there's street lights and the headlights of the car, and it just gave that atmospheric sort of feel. It was soft, and it almost gave it that look like there was a bit of mist in the air as well. So it took away from that really sharp image that you technically get. And it's really good if you want to use it for modeling stuff. It's also quite useful for that.
No, a lot of people actually use the mist filters for like a lot of Sony. Look, a Sony does have like a fairly, I guess, sharp image, and if you want to soften it down and have a closer look to the sort of Black Magic kind of feel, I think a lot of people sort of used it.
Sorry, I'm smiling there because you said Black Magic. You reference,
I'm just being honest, mate.
You mean you're trying to create a cinematic look with your Sony? Come on.
Yes.
All right. So there's other filters. You've got starburst filters, line filters, freckle filters, hundreds and thousands filters. So they basically create like the hundreds and thousands filter is basically all these little multicolored sort of speckles all over the screen. I would never use it. I think it's tacky, but people use it. starburst filters have been around since the beginning of time. I think one of my earliest 42 mil filters that I actually purchased many years ago back on my SLR was a star filter. So what it does is it's got a crossfatch on the actual lens, and it picks up light flares and
reflects it. Yeah,
and it creates this star. Which can be a bit overpowering at times, because I mean, if you're taking the video of the car coming down the street, for example, the headlights would be like multiple stars, the street lights would be multiple stars, the reflections would be so it gets a little bit crazy at times. But look, it's an interesting
look though, and like you said, if you want to start getting a bit more creative or experiment with light and whatever else, this is probably the way to go. I mean, they're probably not costing a lot as well, so you can sort of spend $50 or whatever else on a few different filters, even buy them secondhand, and just get that extra sort of oomph into your images potentially.
Yeah, look, and it's a bit of fun,
Definitely.
Yeah, but don't go off and spend $500 on a star filter.
Like Evan.
Oh, well, I don't spend $500 on a star filter, but there you go. All right, so moving on to something that's probably more commonly found on most people's cameras, especially if you're doing outdoor scenes where there's a lot of glare, like the ocean, beach, that sort of thing, polarizing filters.
Yeah, I love polarizing filters. They're great.
I absolutely detest polarizing filters.
Really?
I got them at home, don't use them. The reason for it, for me personally, is that they only work, polarizing filters. So, and there's two different types of polarizing filters. I'm not sure if I only recently discovered this. There's the circular polarizing filters, also known as CP filters, and then there's horizontal polarizing filters.
What do you mean by horizontal? Never used one.
Exactly. It's not that common that you come across them, but if you're, for example, using a 4x5.65 filter, which is a rectangular sort of filter, you can't do circular polarizing on those because they're rectangular, so you can't really spin them around. So that's a horizontal polarizer, which there's a lot of background to it and stuff, and I don't fully understand it, so I'm not going to pretend that I do. I do have both of them. I don't use a circular. I do use the horizontal one, but probably not so much for the purpose of it, which is to actually remove glares and stuff. So it adds depth to images by saturating its color and reducing reflections. That's by the
well, a lot of people use it for cars, you know what I mean? So like to be able to remove the reflection from the windows and whatever.
Exactly. So if you're doing a shop front shoot and you can see reflections and stuff, a polarizing filter will help reduce that. So it's not only for beach scenes, but
with the polarizing filter, that's the only filter that Photoshop can't simulate. Do you know what I mean? You can't simulate polarizing filter in Photoshop. Did you know that?
I guess because you wouldn't be able to take the glare off because it's already it's been baked into the picture.
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
Because a filter changes the image before it bakes into the camera. So that's actually a very, very valid point. Now the problem with polarizing filters is when you're shooting with them, technically you should be shooting in one direction, keeping the camera in that direction, because depending on the angle that you're moving around can actually create light distortions.
The position of the sun as well.
Yeah. So technically the way it works is the sun's meant to be on a 90-degree angle to a polarizing filter for it to actually function properly. So if you're not shooting with a 90-degree angle to the sun, so like shooting straight forward during midday when the sun's directly above you will work. But say, for example, in the morning, the sun's on the side of you because it's very low on the horizon, you would need to be pointing on a 90-degree angle to that for it to function. And even then, it might not work properly. But because it's dependent on the sun, if you're panning the camera around whilst you've got one of these filters on and the sun's moving direction around you, it can actually create weird sort of patterns all over the screen. So with drones, and this is something that might interest you, shouldn't use a polarizing filter with a drone if you're going to be moving around doing panning shots and stuff like that, because it will start changing the image. You'll darken it out, brighten it. It won't be a consistent color across the whole board. Did you know that?
No, you know what? Never tried the polarizing filter on the drone. So maybe worthwhile.
But if you're doing a beach scene, for example, you're flying over the beach and there's heaps of reflection off the water, polarizing filter would be great. But, and I've done this myself when I first started off, I was flying my drone, and there you go, I admit to having a drone, and I actually occasionally fly it. I was flying over the ocean, and everything was great, and it was cutting out the reflection of the water, but then I started panning away from the sun, so I was doing a horizontal, horizon pan, and the screen started getting darker. It was changing color as I was panning, and it just changed the image completely. So if you're flying a drone and you just want to darken the image, I would probably be suggesting going with an ND filter, which is a solid single color, which doesn't change because of the sun. So yeah, that's
So ND filter will just cut the light down, and then you can readjust the shutter speed depending on which ND filter you've got.
Exactly, yeah. So I've got those running for my drone, and I find that ND filters during really sunny, bright conditions is actually fantastic because it adds a bit of depth to the picture. It makes it richer. That's what I find personally. But so on the subject of neutral density is basically like getting a pair of Ray-Bans for your camera. It's just basically tinted glass, and it cuts out the light. It doesn't matter what direction you point it in. It's just going to minimize it. But there's huge advantages to it. So, for example, say for example you're taking a photo during the day. It's a really, really bright day, and you want to be able to shoot at 2.8 or something like that, so you can get the subject matter, in focus, but everything else blurry.
Yep.
Now, without a filter on, you'd be shooting at probably f13, f14 because it's so bright. You're trying to cut down the light.
0.008 of a second.
Yeah, and ISO 50 ISO, and sometimes it's still too bright, especially if there's a lot of white around you in the snow, for example. So that's when an ND filter is really good because it drops it down and allows you to take, to drop the aperture. You can also do long exposures during the day with it, so you can create that, 1/3 of a second to half a second to a second blur. Which is really useful during the day because normally your camera couldn't do that. If you're doing nighttime photography, it'll be fantastic for it. All right.
Photography wise, yes, but I think it's a lot more valuable in the video component as well, because normally when you're shooting at, say, 25 or 30, frames per second, or even 60 or 50, general rule of thumb is having the shutter speed double than what obviously your shutter speed is, right? So then I'm losing my train of thought now. But normally when you're shooting at, say, 50 frames per second, when in Australia we shoot at 50 frames per second or 60, you want to keep your shutter at sort of around 100 or 120.
Yeah.
So you're going to get that sort of slight motion blur and sort of feel a little bit more live.
It's cinematic.
Cinematic-ish there. So you can sort of pop that shutter speed up, obviously, but you're not going to get that extra sort of buttery, sort of smooth image potentially. And that's where the ND filters come in huge, So I've got a fair bit of ND filters for a GoPro, for instance. When I'm flying the drone with the FPV, then the light gets cut down on the GoPro, and we can really get that really nice sort of, look to it. But I think, video is potentially a little bit more beneficial than photography. I just feel like, you can get away a lot more in photography in this, but not as much in video.
Yeah. Look, it depends on what you're doing. I mean, it comes down to that. I mean, ultimately, But one thing that when we speak about ND filters, we don't normally, most people that I've met don't actually know what the hell a graduated ND filter is. So you introduced me to them, of all things. Yeah, you did. So basically,
long time ago.
A long time ago. They're a rectangular filter, and what it does is on one side, the skinny side, it's actually got like a really dark tone to it. So it's like sunglasses on one side, and the other side is completely see-through. And basically, as it goes from the dark side to the white side, it sort of gets to a point where it crosses over. And so what you do is you use these types of filters when you're taking a photo or a video of, say, for example, the horizon. So if you're
landscape.
Landscape. So if you're taking a landscape photo of the horizon, right, and the sun's coming over the top, what would happen is you would need to adjust your camera to either basically have the sun showing and not being overexposed, but that would mean that the foreground would be dark because everything in the foreground darkens out because you've made the sun so bright. Using a variable ND, you can actually place the sunglass part, the darker part, over where the sun is, and the see-through part in the foreground. And what that does is it actually balances out this really bright sun.
Evens the whole thing out.
Yeah. So that's how you see those photos where there's a sun in the background or the moon or whatever, and the foreground's still quite visible. So it's a variable ND. Now, Photoshop's actually got that built into it, and I believe some video editing packages.
The new one now, yeah. New one's pretty powerful now.
Yeah, so you can go off and basically create variable NDs in your picture in post-production, but the reality behind it is it's always better to have the job done properly on the shoot and then use post-production sparingly because it's always
every time I'm shooting, I want to get my image close to 100% inside the camera itself. You know what I mean? Once you have everything that you want to do inside, then your job is much easier to post-production to make sure that the image is looking 100%. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, trying to have everything in the camera, that's the main component with the ND filters, with the graduating filters potentially.
Yeah. Now, the last type of filter we're going to be talking about today, and which is a segue to the next part of our program, and the next part is talking about the NISI filter that we're testing out. The last type that we're going to talk about is variable ND.
Yep.
So variable ND is basically a filter that's like sunglasses, but it can adjust. So you can have different versions of depth or like darkness to it. So really dark or not so dark. So depending on your situation and depending on how much you want to block out the light, you can actually adjust it. And
so essentially you've got two pieces of glass next to each other, and then you just twist it.
Yep.
And then the more you twist, it potentially gets darker, right?
Yeah. So it's very similar to the circular polarisers, because that's how circular polarizer works as well. There's two pieces of glass together. But we'll get into that a little bit later on. Generally speaking, a variable ND, the only ones that I know of are circular. So they basically screw onto the front of your lens. They're not designed for a matte box or anything like that. So they're the types of filters you can get. Now, there's different sizing and styles of filters as well. So you've got the round screw-on one, which we were just discussing. So literally it just screws onto the front of your lens. You'll notice there's like a little teeth marks, and it screws on. They're actually, generally speaking, the most affordable because they're small, they're lightweight, they don't use too much glass, and they're quite practical. Still photography, fantastic. So they're very common and they're affordable. The next one is the drop-in filters, which generally are designed to fit inside a matte box. So I believe Tilta has a small matte box, and what it does is it has its own patented filters that drop in. They're circular, once again, but it drops into the actual matte box. It doesn't have the metal ring around it, so it doesn't screw on. It just drops in literally into like a little sleeve. So there's those ones as well. So same sort of thing, once again, circular, and they're even more cost effective because they don't have the metal ring around them, so they're cheaper technically if you shop around. If you don't shop around, you get ripped off. But anyway, then there's the square type of filters, the 4x4 as they're called. So they're basically very common with photography. You could use them for video as well, but you'd need to have a mount on the front, which technically I guess you could use the same mount that holds them onto a camera for still photography on the front of a video camera. But it is a bit bulky and cumbersome, and then you have lenses sticking out, and it looks a bit weird.
I've got a pair. I've got a matte box with the Polar Pro, and they slide in, and they are quite chunky.
They are.
So saying that, they're quite good. Actually do enjoy them.
Yeah. So there are matte boxes which are designed to still hold 4x4 filters. So you can get a matte box for your video camera or your still camera, which will hold a 4x4 filter. Nowadays, they're not that common because there's been a move from the 4x4 to the 4 to 5.6, I think it is. Or
oh my God, no.
Anyway, the rectangular type. But you can still buy matte boxes. I believe Small Rig actually produces one of their matte boxes which allows you to hold both 4x4s and 4x5.6s. I think that's what it is.
5.65.
0.65, if you want to be exact, and then, of course, obviously, the 4x5.65, which we were just discussing. So there's 4 different types of filters that you can use.
Quite technical there, Evan.
Yes, I know. I like being technical. But, it's a different type of filter for different types of uses. I found that originally, because I use a lot of brand name filters like Schneider, for example, and Schneider's not a very cheap.
I was going to say that's one of the best ones, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's one of the most expensive. But I had a truckload of them in the 4x4, and I couldn't use them for video because they didn't fit into the standard matte box. Luckily, Small Rig did produce one of their matte boxes which fit them, so I was using them for a while. I'm slowly phasing them out and going the full rectangular type. Okay, so we discussed it earlier, the variable ND. How does it actually work? So there's 2 pieces of glass, right? So follow along here if you can. Okay, it gets a little bit confusing, and basically,
I'll do my best.
You do your best, that's right. So basically there's 2 pieces of glass, and basically those glasses work in opposite direction to one another. The glass has stripes. One of the glasses has like stripes, like prison bars down it, and the second one also has prison bars down it. So automatically, as soon as you put this on, if you've got those prison bars lined up, it's basically those bars are blocking out half the light that's coming in through the filter. And so it's about 50% or whatever it is, maybe 60% of the light still getting in. But as you start turning the front piece of glass, because the back one's it's locked onto your lens, it doesn't move. It's only the front piece of glass that moves. Those lines, those prism bars, start turning horizontally. So you start getting a checker pattern as the more you move it across. And the more you move it across, less light it's letting in. So it's creating a crisscross pattern. So basically, suddenly you're only allowing from 50% of the light coming in, or 50 or 60%, somewhere around there. It's suddenly dropping down to 25 when you've got the full crisscross pattern happening.
Yeah.
Okay. If you don't understand what I'm saying, that's okay. I'm not really making it that clear. Go have a look on the web, have a look at the designs of them. You'll understand when you see it. But what it does is it just limits, and the more you turn it, the more it cuts out the light that is coming into the camera. And that's what it does. It basically limits the light. So if it's too bright, it limits it.
Yeah.
And your camera doesn't.
And that's the whole purpose of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, variable NDs are quite useful, right? They allow you to do a lot more creative stuff. I personally find that I like using them when I'm doing photography, especially on a bright day, obviously, because it cuts the light out. But I also find that it actually creates a little bit of depth. It creates a bit of warmth. It does slightly edit the image.
Yeah, it bit of a color cast though, right?
Well, it depends. I mean, if you've got a good quality variable ND, the color cast is meant to be non-existent. And we'll be talking about the NISI one that's come out, which is called True Color. And you've actually seen some examples of it. We had one we tested out. We'll talk about that in a second. But whilst the variable ND is a great thing to have because it allows you to cut out the line, and pictures aren't super sharp because you're smoothing them out, there are some drawbacks. And basically, I think the biggest drawback of using a variable ND is if you're using a cheap quality one, what it does is it creates a big, you don't see it ironically when you're actually taking the photo. It doesn't really, you don't notice it. So you're taking the photo and basically you go home, you start doing your post-production and you suddenly notice on your screen there's this big dark X pattern across your pictures. So variable NDs have a tendency, especially cheaper ones, that if you basically try and darken them too much and you swing them you rotate them too much, it creates this weird sort of X pattern on the screen and it actually destroys the image and you can't use it. Now, we have one here that you were looking at earlier on. What did you think of that? That was taken to the extreme and it completely destroyed the picture in my light. But what did you think of it?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I don't think you'll be able to even recover that image. That's not a usable image. No. If you had a client shoot or whatever else, that's straight in the bin. You know what I mean? It's really disappointing. But saying that, I mean, that's one of the reasons why the more expensive brands are so expensive, because of the fact that they do put the time and effort, and obviously the quality of the materials is there. Yeah. But yeah, it's quite disappointing. And look, I think when you're starting off, it's okay to try with the cheap stuff.
Yep.
Once you start getting paid work and you start basically producing a lot better quality images, you will see it. And the thing is, it's funny because sometimes you produce an image and then I'll look at it and you'll be like, hey, this is actually looking really good. And then you'll be like, have you seen this, and you point out certain things because your eye is trained for that sort of stuff now, just like my eye. But there is certain parts that you potentially pick up when you're professional, and there are some parts that you won't see it when you're sort of starting off. So spending that extra time and effort on the filters, it does pay off. Saying that though, obviously not everyone's got the money for it. You know what I mean? So
and also with cheaper filters, what happens is you start, not only do you get that weird distortion colors, the cross X that I'm talking about, but you'll also find that parts of the image blurry, like the sharpness suddenly lacks, edges, and So if you're not buying a quality filter, it will impact your image quite substantially. And I've used some atrocious ones when I first started off, and everyone's like, "Oh, use a variable ND," and I ran off. I had no idea what I was doing. I bought a variable ND and I started using it. And I'm like, "Why does this look so crap?" The outside's blurry. There's a big X across the screen. The colors change. I'm like,
focus.
Yeah, so
it gets affected. Yeah,
so it makes a huge difference, right? So, basically, the high quality professional sort of filters, generally speaking, they've got a cutoff, so you can only spin the filter so far, and it stops you from going too far because what it does is it blocks you from getting that weird X. So the earlier filters of the variable NDs just used to spin circular, just continuously 360, and just didn't stop. So they would go bright, dark, and then brighter, then darker. And it just kept going in a round circle. And they relied on you to stop it before it got to that X point, which, let's be honest, I can't see that on the back of this teensy-weensy little screen, especially when my eyes are failing me in my old age. So, there was always a chance that you would have that problem, but the higher-end filters, generally speaking, not all higher end, and once again, there are some cheap filters out there that do this. They stop you from going too far. And that's a huge benefit. So if you are looking to buy one, that's the way to go. That's generally all I've got to say about it.
Is that the sort of, have you covered any pricing? I mean, are we going to cover any pricing on this? Or is it because of the fact that, like I was going to say the maximum that I spent on my filters, I'm pretty sure it was close to $1,300 on the pack.
But the ones that you spent was a whole pack. It was a matte box. Well, it was
It was a matte box.
It was
and
a filters drop in.
2 filters potentially, and they're variable.
Wasn't it more than 2? I think there might have been a couple more.
Maybe 3.
But your filter system was not a cheapo. It was one of the highest end. It was Basecamp, I think it was.
It was Basecamp. So Polar Pro Basecamp.
Yeah. So look, that's probably one of the more renowned high-end filter systems with matte box.
Yeah.
So they're not cheap. They're $1,400. That's not what everyone can afford.
Yeah.
So there's that drawback. And we all talk about prices. There's no problem there, because generally speaking. But all right, so today we've been gracefully lent the NISI Pro Nano ND-VARIO 1 to 5 stop true color variable ND filter. That's a mouthful.
Yes, it is.
And thank you very much to NISI for lending it to us. We promised not to destroy it. And thanks to the video guys also. I just had to do that plug because you did it earlier. I thought I'll do it now. Without their support,
I won't say.
Yeah. Without their support, the program would probably end at about this point now, or we wouldn't be able to do the comparison.
Yeah.
So, all right. So I basically got the filter, and I had a look at it. I played around with it, felt it, played with the twisting stuff. What my initial reaction was, high quality. Now, for me, NISI has always been about good quality production. It's not a cheap brand, never has been, but they're not ridiculously expensive either. Sure. I tend to have NISI Polar Pro as my variable NDs, so I can compare it to those, and I can compare it to earlier ones that I've had, like Tiffin's, which are meant to be good. I just had woeful experiences with Tiffin, with the big X screen, this X happening on the screen, the sky and the trees going blue as opposed to green and blue. So I had a lot of trouble. So initially when I pulled out the NISI filter, the construction of it was really nice. I felt that potentially the ability to move the circular point around might have been a little bit difficult, and that was one of the criticisms that I had initially. I said to you, oh geez, this is a bit fiddly. Yeah. But once I actually put it onto the lens of the camera, I felt that it was actually really, really good. It was smooth, it was crisp, it didn't feel tacky. And what I found really useful was also the filter has a little screw grommet on the side. So you got the round filter, but you got this little handle that sticks out the side. So you can actually just grab the little handle and slide the filter quite easily.
That's nice.
As opposed to putting your hands all over the filter and leaving fingerprints on it and stuff. So that was...
Not just that, but you'll probably get your fingers in the actual image as well.
Yeah.
Right?
So construction-wise, I felt it was pretty good. Yeah. And compared to other filters, I would say it's probably one of the better ones. Polar Pro was the other one that I use. Polar Pro's good construction on it too. There's a few little
They
bits.
are fairly expensive though, right?
They are. And this has generally been a lot cheaper than Polar Pro in past. Prices are starting now to change though, so that needed to be mindful of that. But in saying that, if you're getting the same quality, if not better, then it's justified. We'll get down to the pricing in a few minutes. What I actually have noticed in a recent photo shoot that I was doing on my Polar Pro was that the two lenses are starting to actually wobble around. So that smoothness that was once there is actually, and I don't use that Polar Pro very often. It's actually been sitting on a shelf. I think I've used it at 3 shoots. It's starting to come loose, which is actually really disappointing. But that aside, the construction of NISI was really good. I compared it to the Polar Pro, the HNY, which is also a new filter that's out there at the moment. It's a new brand that's popping up. This particular one is the one that was actually given to me by someone else, and it's a variable ND, so it does the changes. But the interesting part about it was it actually has a variable lens fitting structure to it, so you can actually make it fit from a 70mm lens to the adapter to an 82.
Okay.
So you can actually, like, most
So
of the,
normally 68 to 82, like, and then you can go out.
And the thing is, about most of these polarized, so the circular filters, generally speaking, you'll buy one filter that fits one lens. They're not adaptable.
Yeah.
So, you'll buy an 82mm because the front of your lens is 82, but then the problem, of course, is you've got another lens which is 72, and you're like, oh shit, what do I do?
So do they have it like a step down ring?
Well, you can buy separate step-down rings. That's not a problem. But the H and Y has the novelty of having it all built into one. So you press a button, and the rings that fit onto your lens shrink, and you can put it into a smaller lens. Or you can press the button, and it opens up.
Okay, interesting.
I was a bit nervous about it when I first used it because I thought it was going to scratch the lenses because it protrudes quite far into the lens, and if you're playing with it, the teeth might actually. So I wasn't too much of a fan of that. And then we compared it to the Tiffin, which the Tiffin construction-wise was really good. It felt solid. It's made of metal. So the comparison-wise, it was pretty good. But I think out of all of them, my experience was the NISI was probably my favorite in construction. Yep. It's slimline, which is a huge benefit because if you've got an ultra-wide lens and you've got a filter on the front, what it can do is it can create vignetting. Did I pronounce it right?
Vignetting, yeah.
Oh, damn it, I can never get it right. Anyway, so the NISI one was actually quite slimline, so it was actually quite nice to have on there. Now, construction is one thing, and it's important. That's probably one of the most important. Colours. Now, we've been comparing the colours and looking at them, right? How did you find the colours between the different...
I think I like the Polar Pro the best.
Mm-hmm.
It does saturate the colors a little bit more, but it wasn't to an extreme point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Saying that, though, I think the ND filters should be very neutral, though, right?
Yeah.
So therefore,
that's what the NISI one's.
And that's what I mean. So that's the thing, like you don't want it to have saturated colors and whatever else, even if you just use an ND filter, because then potentially that's what you do in post-processing.
And you want to basically record that image as true to life as possible, So I personally found the Polar Pro, which I'm a big fan of, don't get me wrong, I found that it created a bit of a richness and...
it does look like it.
Yeah, which for me personally, I don't mind it. But I guess if you're...
no, I didn't mind it either. It's just... I guess in this sort of stage, it might be worthwhile into the video component because then it will, make the colors a little bit more lively and whatever else. But if you're doing photography, I think you wanted to keep it as standard as possible. Then in post-production, you can obviously, post up the vibrance or
and
situation.
If you're taking a photo of an image or a video that's of something that's actually extremely vibrant, and suddenly it's changing it and making it even more vibrant.
That's right.
It's a bit of an issue. But look, I've used it. I'm happy with it, so that's not a problem. The Polar Pro for me didn't have that level of vibrancy in there. It didn't change the image too much. I thought it was actually a very clean version, but the one criticism I had when I was looking at it on your screen before is it possibly might be a little bit washed out, just a touch. But it's probably truer to color than what I found with the Polar Pro.
Yeah.
But that was my perception of it. But that's the interesting thing behind it is, depending on which computer you're using, you will actually see different visuals.
It's screens,
It's screens. So, I mean, when you're doing comparison, you need to have the images on the same screen because from the same manufacturer, same screen can have two different settings and they can look completely different.
And that's why a lot of people do screen calibrations and other things to make sure it's all looking 100%.
But what I found was, because I'm a PC user, you're a Mac user, I always have found that Mac makes everything look nicer. Right, it's just there's something about your graphics through a Mac that visually it looks better.
I agree.
Now, with my computer being a PC, everything's really rough and raw, so it lacks that luster that your computer has. Now, when we were looking at the images there, we saw a little bit of a little bit of more richness to the picture, but that was about it. Interestingly enough, when you look at the same pictures on a PC, you start seeing changes in the color. Now, is it the PC? Is it the Mac? I don't know. But
the thing is, with the PC though, you can get different monitors. So I mean, looking at my son's computer right there next in the studio, he's got HP and I think he's got Asus. You know what I mean? So different manufacturers will give you different color casting. You know what I mean as well. So yeah, so Mac is probably the closest thing as a general sort of lookout sort of thing.
But that doesn't make sense, because your Mac is showing you two pictures and it's changing the image to make them look nicer. I'm looking at two images and I'm seeing two different colors on my screen, even though it's the same screen. So somewhere along the line, your machine and my machine are editing that picture. So is yours changing it to make it look nicer? Is mine just being more true to life? I don't know.
Yeah,
but I did notice on your screens with the Mac, your images were pretty much on par. I think the richness was with the Polar Pro. The NISI was probably more true to life in your screen. On my screen, what I noticed with the Polar Pro was it was slightly red.
Oh, okay.
So they had a red tinge to it,
right,
which wasn't appearing on yours, interestingly enough. And the Polar Pro was a slightly yellow color. The NISI was creating a slight red tinge to it, which is interesting. They weren't like, you looked at it and you went, oh my God, it's so different, but it was there. Right. So it depends on the computer system you're looking at it. But look, generally speaking, both those brands were producing a very, very nice image.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, 100%. And it's, I don't think you can go wrong with any of them, to be honest with you.
Exactly. We did then compare it to the H&Y, the variable ND one with the variable sizing. And what was your impression of it? I remember the first thing you said was like, ugh.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I think when you didn't, I can't remember from the top of my head now, but when you didn't stop down all the way, it was kind of okay. But as soon as
but what was the color you were seeing? Because the whole screen became yellow and jaundiced.
Yeah, it was actually. You're right.
Yeah, so you started noticing the color casting there, which is interestingly enough, the pricing on the H&Y is equivalent.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So it's kind of weird that was happening, because you'd expect something at that price point to be producing quality. And then we stepped it down. I think it was like 5 stops, and suddenly what happened to the screen?
Yeah, was it like a big black line all across?
So this massive black shadow, just like someone was hiding the light and blocking the light. So it was actually really obvious. And ironically, that filter also has an adjustment on it, which actually stops you from going too far, but it still does it anyway. Yeah, which is kind of a letdown. I didn't show you the photos from the Tiffin because this was ages ago that I did a test on it, but the Tiffin was horrific. Everything was blue. It changed everything to blue. So we didn't even get those natural yellow or red colors coming out, which made it nice and warm. It was blue. It was terrifically blue, and there was a massive X across the screen. So construction-wise so far, I have to say the NISI and the Polar Pro were both very, very good. I would say the NISI was better in construction. Okay. Color-wise, on your computer, did you have a preference? You said Polar
Pro, I think, but that's because it was just a little bit more
saturated.
Not just saturated, but more crisper, maybe. I don't know. It looked really good. I mean, look, I'm a fan of Polar Pro, and look, I'm also a fan of NISI as well, because I've got both. You know what I mean? I've also got Lee filters as well, but that's sort of probably out of what we're talking about right now. But it's I think NISI is probably one of the better ones from my comparison. But saying that though, that's the thing, isn't it? Like, it's almost to a point where personal preference comes into play as well. I used Polar Pro for video more work, and then I used the NISI for photography work more. So yeah,
bit of both. All right. Now, color aside, we're talking about focus and blurs and stuff like that. Now, when you zoom into these pictures, every lens, every filter is going to create some type of distortion. Yeah, it's just part of life. You put a filter in front of your camera, it's going to look. You had this argument with me many years ago that any lens that goes in front of your camera is going to destroy the image to some degree. Filter or glass. Yeah, sorry, I keep saying lens. This was the wrong terminology. So yes, there is a minimal amount of additional distortion. With the NISI filter, with the Polar Pro, they're there. Can you see it unless you're zooming into pixels? No.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I got rid of it, because of the fact that when I was doing night photography, long exposure photography, or anything with sort of a lot more protruding lights in a way, like street lights or whatever else, the ND filter, or should I say the UV filter, it just destroyed the image. It would just give me extra lights that were not there, and like distortions and reflections and whatever else. So I just basically removed it fully, and that's one of the reasons why I don't use it anymore, unless I'm shooting like a off-road bike.
As we've learnt, you need the filters for that.
Yeah.
But the question for you is, was it a high-end filter, UV filter that you had on there? Was it a cheapo $50 thing that you chucked on there thinking, I don't really care, it's see-through glass?
And that's probably one of the reasons, or one of the things that I can't really answer, because it was probably close to 8-10 years ago. You know what I mean? And I'm sure the quality's obviously improved by now.
Yeah,
100%.
but you wouldn't have 8 to 10 years ago. You would not have been chasing a $500 UV filter, right?
Well, that's true too. Yeah.
Yeah. So it would have been one of the bottom end, because you couldn't see the justification in it other than protecting your lens.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hazard a guess and say that it was a cheapo, and that's probably why you had that problem.
Yeah, it's a possibility. Yeah.
I don't have these problems. I've got the high end stuff.
All right, I know.
Gonna be like me. All right. So whilst every piece of glass that you put in front of your lens is going to create some type of distortion or issue, the NISI barely noticeable unless you were zoomed in 100 times in, and then you'd start noticing slight differences to the original photo. Polar Pro, once again, same issue. Slight distortions, but you would not notice unless you totally zoomed in.
Yeah, right.
H&Y, you didn't even need to zoom in. It was ISO 10 million. It was just grainy.
Yeah, right.
So it really hugely changed the picture, and I didn't even worry about visual distortion with the Tiffin, because I was more worried about the blue and the X across the screen to even get to that point. So that was a
Have you noticed that the darker, so the more stops there is, the more color distortion? Or do you find that it sort of was happening like right at the sort of 1 to 2 stop range as well?
It progressively gets worse.
Yeah.
Because you are totally changing the image, and but the NISI wasn't too bad from the low end to the high end. Now, one of the things that we haven't spoken about with these filters is the level of stops that we're changing. So the NISI is actually a 1 to 5. Mm-hmm. The Polar Pro, I believe, was 2 to 6. So the NISI is giving you 1 extra stop of darkness, so it's getting darker than the actual Polar Pro. Mm-hmm. So if you want a wider variety of shadowing or darkening the image out, NISI hands down wins. It was amazing. Now, what I found was on the actual filters themselves, they've got little notches and they have numbers, and it sort of tells you the 1, 2, 3, and supposedly that 1, 2, 3 relates to stops. Mm-hmm. I didn't even bother with the H&Y, the Tiffin. Let's not even worry about those. They're just thrown out of the picture. So comparing it to Polar Pro and NISI, the Polar Pro, the numbers did not match up to the stops. All right. It was out. It was completely out. The NISI was actually on par to what the stops were, which surprised me, because I just thought they were just random numbers right. But they matched up. Like if I went down 1 notch and I turned that, it matched. It was actually surprising. So, so you've got a wider range with the NISIs than you do with the Polar Pro. And that in itself is actually quite good, because you can go a lot darker. So I was quite impressed with that. Yeah, right. With the Polar Pro, they've actually got 2 sets of variable NDs. So you've got the 2 to 6 and the 6 to 9 or something like that. Yeah. So, obviously it's a wider range when you use both of them together, but then, you're paying twice the price for them. And I think the 6 to 9 is actually even more expensive.
I don't know, because I've got it as a part of the kit. So, and to be honest with you, I hardly use the 6 to 9 because, I find that unless you're shooting at, say 1.4, 1.2, it's 2 to 6 is very, very efficient to that.
It's ridiculously difficult. So, look, generally speaking, that was my feeling about these lenses. Filters, I should say. If I was to go off and buy one from scratch, and I didn't have already the ones that I do, NISI would definitely be one of my favorite top filters that I would be going for. Yeah, right. Everything was there: construction, quality,
no saturation.
Minimal. Well, yeah. Look, you can add that in post production, and it's not meant to be.
No, that's right.
NISI's selling point is it's true to color, which realistically, after looking at it on your computer, I've got to say it was pretty impressive. It was, yeah. Comparing it to the original picture with no filter on it at all, it was on par. Yeah. There was slight variances, but that's to be expected.
Yeah, that's 100%.
Yeah. So, look, if I was starting from scratch personally, the NISI would definitely be one of the ones that I'd be looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Polar Pro, once again, good quality, can't go wrong with it. H&Y, they're probably going to sue us for saying this, but I wouldn't go there with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, you can answer that email.
Tiffin, once again, one of those ones that I wouldn't go near either.
So okay, price wise then.
Okay.
So
ironically, they were all except for the Tiffin, which I think I got that given to me or bought it secondhand or something, so I can't give you a price on that. Though Tiffin at the moment is meant to be, fantastic and everyone raves about it, but my experience has been anything but. The NISI, the Polar Pro, and the H&Y all sell for about $399 each. So H&Y for that price should be giving you a nice clean image, not a yellow image. It should not have grain in it, and it should not be creating an X across the screen.
I agree.
How would I rate the H&Y? I wouldn't probably give it a 1 out of 10.
Oh, wow.
I just did not like using it. If anyone wants one, I've got one sitting there which I don't use, so you're welcome to it. The Tiffin, I can't even rate that because it was so early on, just did not like it. It was crap in every way. Had good construction though, so maybe I'll give it a 2 out of 10 with construction alone. Polar Pro, I'm a huge fan of Polar Pro, always have been. I would say they're probably a 9 out of 10. NISI, I would be saying 9 out of 10, if not 9.5.
Yeah, right.
So if I was starting from scratch again, NISI would definitely be the one that I'd be looking at. And look, NISI has been one of those underdogs for a very long time. They've never really done promotions and stuff like that. They've just relied on the quality of their products. I do have a lot of NISI stuff at home, especially for my drones or my filters for my drones and NISI. So yeah, look, I would say if I was going again, NISI's the way to go. Polar Pro, very close second. And there's nothing else that I've actually seen at the moment which I would say go for.
Yeah. I use a lot of, for my drone work, I use a lot of Polar Pro. Saying that though, I remember buying the Polar Pro for the Mavic 3. And it was great on the wide angle lens. But I was getting out of focus image on the zoom lens, believe it or not. So it was a bit because it was like a one piece of glass on the top front of both lenses. But for my GoPro stuff, I use all the Polar Pro on my camera work. So like if I use it on my S7S3, that's all Polar Pro as well. And look, I'm impressed with the image there. I mean, there's no issues, and I do like it. You know what I mean?
Look, you can't go wrong.
No, that's right.
Reputable company. They've been good. They've done a lot of research. They're up there. So look, basically for me, I was actually quite impressed with the NISI.
Yeah.
I have always used NISI as one of my secondary filters across the board. Polar Pro is also there, but I was actually extremely impressed with this variable ND. And all the comparisons we've been doing today are about variable ND filters, the ones that spin around. So that's not to say that the companies have got other products that aren't competitive to each other, but we're talking about specifically the variable NDs today. So that's pretty much all I've got to say. There was one thing that I wanted to give people a heads up on. If you're buying a circular filter for your camera, my suggestion, and early on I didn't click with this when I was actually getting my filter, so I spent a lot of money for no reason. You've got different types of lenses. You've got like a 77, 72, 82, and you want to buy one variable ND, and you're like, oh, which one should I buy it for? Should I buy it for the 77s, the 72, the 82? Which one do I use the most? And you buy it for the one that you use the most, and then suddenly go, oh shit, I need this another variable for the other lens. So suddenly you got to buy two variable, and then suddenly, oh shit, I'm using a third lens, and so you're going to go off and spend $400 at a time. Not very logical. So what you do is you find your biggest lens that you've got, say it's an 82, and what you do is you buy the 82, and then you buy step-down rings. So basically you can put that ginormous filter on a smaller lens with step-down rings, which cost like, $8 to $10 each, and instead of spending $400 a pop. So it's a huge difference in price.
Just keep in mind, if you're going wide angle, you might get some vignetting with that.
Yes. So if you've got a wide angle lens, look for filters that are slimline, because the traditional ones are actually quite thick. They're huge, and they will create that distortion on the side and darkness. Right. And I'm not even going to try and pronounce vignetting. I'm just going to say darkness and distortion. Okay. So get the step up rings. If you are getting the step up rings, word of advice: do not buy the cheap eBay Chinese
Yeah.
step-up rings. They have once you tighten them up together, they actually won't come off. They stick on like super glue,
Mhm.
and you can never remove them again. So you'll have this thing stuck to your lens.
Because they use cheap materials, that's why.
Yeah, and the materials lock on, but also the actual ring on the outside has no teeth. So when you try and grab it to take it off, your fingers just slip off it. There's no grounding point. One of the reasons I was originally moved to Polar Pro, and this is a really, really weird reason for it, I got one of those step-up lenses, rings, step-up rings or filters, stuck to a lens of my camera, and the only way I could take it off was by actually cutting it with a saw. And I was paranoid I was going to destroy my lens, and I managed to get it off, but it took me so long, and it was such a pain in the ass. And then I realized that Polar Pro has these teeth on the outside, which actually, once you grab it, your fingers hold onto it and they don't slide, so you can actually take the damn things off.
I'm pretty sure NISI actually comes up with like an external ring.
They do. They have teeth on it as well. Slightly different to the Polar Pro. You need to figure out which one works for you and which one doesn't. But the step-up rings, I do know that Polar Pro does sell step-up rings, which have teeth on it, which makes it a lot easier. But those step-up rings are like $80 to $90 each, which is ridiculous for a piece of metal.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? You got to sort of make a decision if you will. I want to take it this more professional, and you got to spend more money on it, and then have less headaches later on, or initially, or whatever else, or you want to go El Cheapo and just try it out and see what works.
Yeah, but remember, the El Cheapo will get stuck on there, and you will be cursing for the rest of your life. It's worth spending a few extra dollars for one that has a bit of teeth on it. That's pretty much it from me.
Yeah, that's it, man. I enjoy filters, but I think, for me, just trying to get everything done properly, and how can I say, I don't use a lot of filters, but put it that way in my work, so like on my FX6 I use a lot of ND filters, like built-in ND filters, and the only ones I'll potentially use will be on the A7S III, which it doesn't have any like internal ND filters. So it's it's each to their own, it depends on what look you look going for, and it's really up to you what your niche is, in that sense. So, but yeah, no, I totally agree with you, mate, and thank you for organizing for all those filters and testing and everything else as well, because I haven't actually done much with it.
That's right. Look, on that note, I've got to take a moment to say thank you very much to Video Guys for being the people who organised it all. And thank you very much to NISI Australia, that is, for supplying us with the filter for testing. It's always good to get products and get some hands-on experience with them. And so when you can compare them to other things as well, as valuable, as opposed to, it's a great product, but you don't have anything to compare it to. So the fact that we have something to compare it to, I think adds value to it.
100%. Yeah. No, thank you. That's it. See you in the next episode.
Thank you, Marty.
Thanks, guys. All the best.
Hope your back gets better.
I know. I hope so. Good luck.
Take care.
Bye.